Hi, welcome to ICS Arabia. Nice to see you again, guys. Today we have a special guest, a female guest, for the first time at ICS Arabia, and we will be talking about disaster recovery in the OT industry, how important it is, and why it's crucial for the humans and for the assets and for organizations. It's not just a best practice, it's a necessity. So, welcome, Saltanat Mashirova. Hi,
Hello,
nice to see you.
nice to see you.
Thank you for coming and joining.
Thank you very much for having me here.
Sure.
And I'm privileged to be here in ICS Arabia. This is my first time also in
You're the
in
first woman.
Thank you so much.
Please tell us about yourself. When did you...
So my name is Saltanat, and currently I work as product management lead at Honeywell. So I can give you about my background. So first of all, it's OT industry. So I'm originally from Kazakhstan, and I was born in oil and gas city. So my dad was working in oil and gas. My relatives were working in oil and gas. So for me, the OT was quite natural growing up because I've seen the even PPE evolution, the closing evolution from safety perspective, I would say.
Okay.
So I have started my career working as an for Asian gas pipelines, providing them services. Then I switched to do my master's degree in the University of California, Irvine. Then I came back. Then I have two kids, two boys. And then after that, I continued my journey in cybersecurity. So in a nutshell, I have an on-site experience, meaning I was an on-site cybersecurity engineer in oil and gas plant. So I was involved in the greenfield and brownfield projects. I used to do the network configurations, commissioning activities, vulnerability assessments, then integration of brownfield, greenfield assets. So I used to do the hands-on activities. Then I moved to the Dubai, to the Center of Excellence, where I have, so in my oil and gas work is because I worked in one of the top oil and gas companies. So I was privileged they had a very strict cybersecurity standards, which we needed to follow. So then I moved to Center of Excellence in Dubai, where I have executed numerous cyber physical risk assessments. It's not just a risk assessment, but it's a cyber physical risk assessment where I have analyzed process installation for the hackable scenarios. So, and it's a lot of things are patented there. I think there are only few in the world who does this. So I was a global person who used to execute this. Then I moved to the product management role where I have seen in asset owners that they do manually. How can I help them to solve their problems? So now, before sharing my screen, my topic is an approach to disaster recovery in OT. So this is my research, actually. It hasn't been published yet. I'm planning to publish soon because I got a lot of requests from the audiences. Where can we get the white paper for that? So the idea came out about, I think the first 2021, we had there was a colonial pipeline attack, and then terminology resilience has been introduced. So I remember World Economic Forum for Oil and Gas came up with the term resilience. Resilience means that when your proactive countermeasures are failed, how resilient you are to an attack. Can you recover quick with minimal impact? Then after that, CrowdStrike happened. So, and then a lot of countries started introducing word resilience and asking asset owners to be resilient. And also the NIS2 for Europe came up where they said business continuity plan is mandatory. So when I started again doing the research, I found out for disaster recovery, it's all about backup and restoration.
Mm-hmm.
They don't have anything related to the process, or it is adapted from IT. Mm-hmm. So all of this came to and my experience cyber physical risk assessment brought me an idea to come up with a disaster recovery. So I have presented at S4, and it got attention from several governments, Singapore, Denmark, other European governments. And I've been presenting this in many governments, and this is not patented, it's a framework, so it's free to use basically for any asset owner. So now, in order to save time, yeah.
Shall we? Yeah, if you're ready, whenever you're ready.
Yeah, let me share my screen first. So this is the screen too.
So when did you release this research? I mean, when did you?
So I'm planning. So this is a presentation I have presented, but I hope I will publish the white paper either in December or January. I think more or less is in the January I will publish it. I started writing it, and it will be published, and I will share it.
So it's a new research. Okay.
Yeah. So let me start my topic. So an approach to disaster recovery in operational technology. So before moving on to the disaster recovery, we want to know what is the main objectives of OT disaster recovery. So why do we need it? So here I have came up with the 4 objectives, which is that we want to prepare personnel to respond effectively in a crisis. We don't want any ad hoc response during the crisis. Then we want to manage the crisis disaster in an organized and effective manner in order to reduce the recovery time. Then the 3rd objective is we're trying to limit the impact of a cyber attack to the various production locations, because in the OT we have units, we have different production locations. And then in the main goal is we want to create a recovery plan that under various impact scenario can reestablish the plant's mission within the optimal recovery time. So if we look to the diagram, we want to make sure that our objective is the cost of recovery. Our optimal recovery time is between the intersection of cost to recover and cost of disruption. So we want to minimize the impact, and we don't want to spend much money for that as well. We don't want overspending. So then when I have presented this disaster recovery, I came out the confusion among a lot of asset owners globally that there is a business continuity plan, there is a disaster recovery plan, there is a but what is the connection between them? So there should be business continuity management as an umbrella. Then it should include the following documents. So we first start with the business continuity plan. So the business continuity plan, it's all about to sustain essential business operations while recovering from significant disruption. So BCP can be an IT side, or it can be both OT and IT together. But a lot of the times, the IT side, they can be owner of BCP. Then we have continuity of operation plan. So it is, okay, let me put it here. So it provides procedures and capabilities to sustain the plant's essential functions at an alternate site or when constrained due to the failed subsystems for a predefined recovery point, period. Then we have crisis communication plan. It's all about communication, meaning when we do have disaster, there should be some procedures which can disseminate the status reports to the personnel and public. This is very important, especially to the reputation of the asset owner. Then occupant emergency plan, it's all about the safety, meaning that it tries to minimize the loss of life or injury and protect the property damage in response to a physical threat. Then cyber incident response plan is all about incident response, how you respond, how you detect, how you eradicate, how you contain your incident. Then we have information system contingency plan, which provides the procedures to recover the information system. Then we do have disaster recovery plan. So this presentation is all about disaster recovery plan. But in your organization, you might have the documents named differently, but the concept is the same. So it comes down under the umbrella of business continuity management. So let's look at the relations of these documents. So we said BCP and continuity of operations plan. This is plant operation focus. Then we have plant people focus. It's about crisis communication plan, and then occupant emergency plan. It's about reducing the injury. And we do have OT focus, where we said it's incident response plan, it's information system contingency plan, and it's a disaster recovery plan. So this is a plant relational focus. And now if we look to the diagram, this is a scope of the business management scope, business continuity management scope. If we look to the disaster recovery scope has the 3 phases. So it starts from activation and identification, followed by reconstitution. So usually disaster recovery, it is invoked by the emergency response team in reaction to interruption of normal production. So now let's look at these 3 phases. What is included in these 3 phases? So as I said, it starts with the activation and notification phase. So usually it is in activation and notification phase, usually disaster is announced and the disaster has been assessed. So it's the initial actions to take when the system is down. So the first action, we want to make sure how we describe the notification of recovery personnel. Then how we can identify that this is a release disaster. And what is the plan, like how it gets activated and how we mobilize our team. Then after activation notification, we start the recovery. So in recovery, we need to make sure that we define the recovery strategies, we define the recovery sequence, we define the escalation procedures. We need to make sure we do have backup repository where the backup media is located. Maybe the transportation is required if, for example, your backup is 60 kilometers away. Then after recovery, a lot of cases in disaster recovery, especially in IT, they don't take into account reconstitution phase. So reconstitution is all about making sure that we're validating that after recovery, if any deviation has been introduced, we're fixing this during the reconstitution. So now we have described the phases of the disaster recovery. Now, what is the elements of the disaster recovery process? So the major elements that I have described here, it is at least you should have it, but you might have it more. But this one is, as I said, it's must to have. So we have a RTU, RPU, MTD. You don't have to worry about this. I'm gonna explain this terminology because not a lot of people are familiar with that. Then we have a recovery and restoration process, which includes the roles and responsibilities, which includes loss scenarios, recovery sequence, reconstitution, and it includes the recovery test. So let's break down this. So what I'm going to discuss about this, I'm gonna quickly discuss the terminology, but my focus is gonna be only on loss scenarios, recovery sequence, and reconstitution. The main reason for that, because we have only 1 hour. Usually for me, in order to cover everything, it's 3 to 4 hours. So let's align first terminology, because I'm gonna use those terminologies a lot when we start talking, moving with the slides. So maximum tolerable downtime. So the maximum tolerable downtime is basically the total amount of time is the business is willing to accept that production outage is down. For example, if your HMI station is down, how many hours you can tolerate until it becomes a problem? HMI, usually if it's down, it creates a loss of view. In some, I remember asset owners, they said we can only tolerate 4 hours. So which means your maximum tolerable if downtime is 4 hours, after that it becomes a problem. And some, for example, let's take engineering workstation. Engineering workstation, because you don't need engineer workstation to be up real time, you only use it during configuration. you might be okay for that engineering workstation to be down maybe 1 day. So usually it should be identified by the business units. Then we have recovery time objective. So recovery time objective, it defines the maximum amount of time that a system resource can remain unavailable before there is an unacceptable impact. So recovery time objective is always less than maximum tolerable downtime. So for example, as I said, if we have identified HMI 4 hours, then recovery time objective must be less than 4 hours. So it's a time when we need to make sure, for example, if RTO is 3 hours, we need to make sure during 3 hours, we're going to recover our systems. Then there is a recovery point objective. Recovery point objective, it's all about data, meaning that I'm not going to read here. So it's all about data. It means that, for example, if you take a backup of once in a 6 months, it means your RPO is 6 months, which means you're losing the data of 6 months, for example. So RPO, it's all about data and it's tied into your backup strategy. So the main key element here is a maximum tolerable downtime. This is a key parameter for recovery. So MTD drives your recovery strategy, the level of detail for the recovery procedures. For example, if the DCS, for example, distributed control system, is 4 hours or vibration monitoring system is 5 weeks, the recovery strategy for this two is going to be completely different and investment will be the difference. Now let's move on to the next one, which is roles and responsibilities, loss scenarios and recovery sequence, reconstitution and recovery test. So here I have divided to the 2 parts. So we do have recovery strategy, which talks about selecting this loss scenario, which invokes the crisis and emergency response team, and optimal recovery sequence, which optimize the reconstitution time. Then we have recovery process. It's mainly about roles and responsibilities. Once you have identified roles and responsibilities, how can you conduct the drill? So, and then again, from now on, my focus is going to be mainly in the recovery strategy. So before moving on to the disaster recovery, I really like the process safety. So a lot of people say disaster, okay, this is disaster, but in your company, what does it mean disaster? Any incident can be disaster or not, because not all the incidents leads to the disaster. That's why in order to identify the disaster criteria, I have first started looking to the process safety, because process safety has well-established procedures and has been in our industry for decades. So let's start with talking about process safety, emergency shutdown system. So the purpose of emergency shutdown system is to initiate the measures to reduce the potential for escalation of fire or explosion or toxic hazard. So it's the sole purpose of emergency shutdown system is to make sure that it safely shut down the process if it causes any danger. So, and it has a levels of it. For example, ESD3. In this case is the deviation outside operating limits of equipment. Then we have ESD2, which means deviation outside operating limits of process unit. Then we have ESD1, which is an emergency situation in order to bring the facilities to a known predefined safe state. Then we have a decision to abandon facility. So if you look from ESD3 to ESD0, it's increasing according to the hazard level. Now let's take this and apply it to the cybersecurity. So in cybersecurity, it's all about cyber incidents. So here I put it SD. SD means basically shutdown. So here again, we start doing the scaling. So SD3 means we do have some anomaly local cyber incident, no process downtime here. Then we have a scale 2, which is a noteworthy cyber incident, local incident, loss of support function, and process downtime less than recovery time objective. Then we have SD1, which is an extensive incident, single site, multiple functions impacted, manual operation still possible, loss of connectivity, loss of essential function, and the downtime is less than maximum tolerable downtime. So in case if we say HMI is 4 hours, it's going to be less than 4 hours. Then we have SD0, which is major or widespread incident, multi-site impact, multiple essential functions impacted, manual operation is not possible, so downtime is more than maximum tolerable downtime. So basically, disasters are considered those loss scenarios that result in shutdown greater than maximum tolerable downtime of recovery time using regular corrective maintenance resources. So this should be, I have identified the criteria. In your company, you should make sure that you have this kind of criteria that is gonna consider disasters, that invokes a disaster recovery process or emergency response team. So now we have identified the criteria that SD0 is our criteria for the disaster, but what kind of cyber attack scenarios can cause this kind of disaster? It depends from your industry, like energy, manufacturing, utilities, pipeline. You need to identify your own loss scenarios and based on the threat intelligence reports and then likelihood. I have identified the just generic ones here as an example, but you should be able to have this in the perfect scenarios during your cyber physical risk assessment. So destruction of field device firmware, which is unlikely, which means there is a small likelihood of occurrence in the industry. However, no known cases exist. So I had a lot of questions about destruction of field device firmware, but it is still possible. Destruction of network device firmware is also unlikely. Then another scenario can be destruction of network device operating systems, which is possible, which means has occurred in the industry, but only for targeted attacks executed by the nation states. Then we have a likely, which means loss of network performance or connectivity, or full encryption or disk wipe. So here, which means it is likely, which means frequent occurrence in the industry. Why? Because for this kind of, the real example is a ransomware. And ransomware is one of the main, I would say, cyber attacks that has happening in our industry. It's not impacting IT anymore, it's impacting OT as well. So now we have identified the loss scenarios, which invokes the emergency response team, and we have identified the disaster criteria. Now, what about the roles and responsibilities? So here, emergency management team should have two legs. One is for the incident response and another one for the recovery. And in the recovery, it should be divided also. It is a business recovery and then disaster recovery team. So then you need to make sure that you have your roles and responsibilities like RASI chart for each phases, like activation notification phase, recovery, and reconstitution phase. You need to make sure that each person has been identified in the RASI chart and has this responsibility. Is it responsible, accountable, support, or informed? So basically, the recovery team should comprise the members from each of the critical areas within the team scope of responsibilities, which those teams must be involved from the activation notification phase, followed by recovery and reconstitution phase. So again, in any company, it's different, but it should liaise with an emergency management team. So they're responsible for recovery execution, mobilization, and communication. So now we have identified roles and responsibilities. We have our disaster criteria. Now the disaster happened. Now we need to make sure, now we need to move to the recovery strategy. So we want to execute our recovery. So now coming back to process safety, because I'm aligning, taking the process safety procedures and applying to the cyber with some difference on it. So We talked about emergency shutdown systems. So those emergency shutdown systems should be compatible with the restart philosophy, covering operating configuration from total block shutdown status to the full production status. So this is usually in a process safety startup you have. Initial startup when the plant is going to be started for the first time after commissioning stage. Unit is usually when you have to start up the particular unit. And there is a black start. So black start, I have written black start, I have executed black start. That's why I take this black start example and going to apply to the cybersecurity. Black start is usually similar to the initial start, but can occur at any time during plant life cycle of plant operations. So in black start, you have a sequence, but it's mostly within equipment. Like you first power on the cabinets, then you go to the main controller, then you go to the level 3 device, so on and so forth. As I said, I'm taking a black start and applying to the cybersecurity, but it has a differences a little bit. Because in the cyber, we're not, yes, we are focused with equipment, but we are most of the time we need to make sure we're focusing on the functions, not the asset base. Why? Because with our current technology, such as virtualization, one asset can hold different functions. For example, one workstation might have safety instrumented system application. It can have DCS application. It can have fire and gas, for example. And we can have even one server cluster, which can have logging, the main controller, APC, historian, alarm, all of these things. As I said, because of the technology, they can hold several applications. So we need to identify where is our functions. So once we have identified functions, now we want to go to the priority, because the recovery priority determines the sequence in which functions are recovered. So how we identify the priorities? So we need to, priority, when it comes to the priority, it's very important. Priority is very specific to your organization. It's not same from organization to organization because of the business mission. So now how we identify the priorities? First, we need to identify essential functions first. For example, here in priority 1, we have DCS, we have safety system, FGS, and supportive network equipment such as switches, which are necessary for production systems. And then we have metering. Why? Because DCS has a direct dependency on metering, which means when we are identifying the priority, we need to take into account dependencies. And I will explain in the next slide what does it mean, dependency. But as I said, priority is very specific from company to company, because in my experience, one company told me voice over IP is priority number 1 for them in order to disseminate the report status, in order to talk with the people. In some organizations, they said radio systems are priority 1, because especially if the employees are out to the offshore, they need to be able to communicate. So now, because we said that dependency identifies the priority, how we can identify the dependencies. So this is a diagram that I came up, but I'm going to explain. So system interdependencies, what is this? Why we need to identify this? We want to identify in order to ensure the integrity and the operability of system recovery. So the dependency can be related to different things. It can be related to the type of interconnections, for example, domain trust, connectivity between systems, physical and logical controls between systems. Dependency can be even location-wise. For example, one RE substation is dependent from the main operating site, and so on and so forth. So let's start to look at these examples. So for example, direct dependency. Here, for example, one HMI depends on server, for example, or indirect dependency. Here, historian C is dependent on a OPC interface server on B, which is dependent on the DCS server A. Another example is codependency on B, for example. For example, let's say you have a single switch and you have connected the safety controller and the BPCS controller. And then we have, for example, interdependency, which it can be the main controller or it can be redundant distributed database syncing. Then codependency of B, C, D, E on A. The example can be, for example, all of those Windows hosts depend on a DNS housed within a DC if you don't have the local files on those Windows hosts. This is not good, for example. So when you're identifying dependency, you'll see, I don't have redundancy here. Oh, I have a single point of failure here. For example, this is good. This A has a redundant dependency on, so B, C, D, E. For example, the example can be here, hypervisor middle layer that is over a cluster of servers. So dependencies also helps to identify priorities, but at the same time, it helps you to identify where you don't have redundancy. So now we have identified, now we say in the recovery strategy, we need to identify recovery priority. Now let's say we do have recovery priority. Now we have identified recovery sequence. Now we need to identify how we're going to recover. I prefer process unit driven recovery. And I forgot to mention here when I start talking. In this disaster recovery, I'm not taking into account natural disasters like the earthquake, hurricane, tornado. It's only related to the cyber. So, and then here in this talk that I'm not covering, and I'm assuming that in your organization you have spares available, you do have eradication method available. That's why now we start with the process unit driven recovery. Why process unit driven recovery is better? Because it is focused on the mission. Meaning, for example, let's take the boilers. So the potential impact of the boilers is a plant-wide steam. And the maximum tolerable downtime for this process unit is 24 hours. So which means after 24 hours, it's going to be a problem. So this boilers, what kind of functions does it have? It has a DCS and it has a safety systems. Then now we break down this distributed control system, safety system. It has its own recovery time objective and sequence to the what kind of assets? Server, console, controller, and transmitter, for example. And how it should recover by the sequence, and then we said the sequence is identified from the dependency and priority. For example, server comes first, then console comes second, then controller comes third. Then we have safety system. In safety system, server, let's say workstation comes first, then control comes second, and server comes third. And here you need to consult with your OEM to know how to bring up those devices in a sequential manner. So now you have completed your disaster recovery. You have executed all of this. You have recovered. Now we need to move on to the third phase, which is a reconstitution. So what is a reconstitution means? So reconstitution means it's a process to correct for possible recovery point deviation required for starting up the production process. So when you're recovering, you might introduce some changes to the process. Maybe when you're recovering, you have upgraded your license. Let's say, especially right now, I know with, for example, with the VMware, which has been acquired by Broadcom, a lot of asset owners are facing problems. So anything that you have introduced, any changes during the recovery should be corrected during the reconstitution phase. So reconstitution is something that may not be handled by the cybersecurity teams, but it needs to be considered for the process restart. That's why you, as a cybersecurity team, you have to understand where's the overlap between system restoration and ensuring the control system is ready for restart. So here's an example. I'm just giving you as an example, but you might have more than that. And that's why you need to work with your process people in order to identify this. So, for example, you might do the validation of control modes, such as ensuring a BPCS controller settings before starting a unit backup. Then you have a validation of control set points, setting controller set points such as flows, pressure levels to startup parameters. Then you might do the validation of outputs for manual modes, for example. If, for example, BPCS loops in manual mode, ensuring the outputs are in the right position to not cause hydraulic hammering. You might look for the process and startup sequence check. You need to check your alarm modes and limits. Alarm modes and limits is very important because alarm parameters might be fed from an external source, and this connection must be restored. Then advanced test functionalities and process safety, advanced control modes. Maybe you have to reload into the APC servers depending on when the last backup was made, checking the automation status, validating controller states. And apart from that, you might also check link status, for example, all the links are operational. Also, you might check the logs. For example, are there any abnormal conditions? Also, you might do the security checks. Are there antivirus and intrusion detection system signatures have been updated because you had a cyber attack, right? And then you might also, least but not last, to check user accounts, that if you change the user password, can they run and log in with their accounts? So after reconstitution phase, your process is ready to restart. So key takeaways, and I haven't finished yet, but you need to keep in mind that the large disaster recovery efforts are much more than the restoration for backup. So when you hear about backup and restoration, this is very, very important, but you need to take into account, as I said, the recovery sequence, reconstitution, dependency, and all of this take into account in order to restore with an optimal recovery time. Then you have to identify loss scenarios, because not all the incident leads to the disaster. Because, like, for example, you have been attacked, maybe you can contain your 2-3 machines and your process is not shut down, it just continues to operate. That's why it's very important what kind of scenarios can cause this kind of disasters and what is their likelihood. For the likelihood, you might need to look for your threat intelligence reports, or with the company that is helping you with your detection systems, do they have a threat intel feeds? So the recovery scope should include automation functions, recovery priorities, dependencies, and then we need to make sure that we're not forgetting the reconstitution of the production process. But I don't want to finish here because I got a lot of questions. Yes, this is good, but when we should start creating disaster recovery strategy? Because in many cases, and even if we take into account the NIST cybersecurity framework, like identify, detect, protect, all of this is the 5 pillars. And in these 5 pillars, recovery is the last. So, and then that's why a lot of companies think, okay, let me first take care of my detection, let me take care of my proactive measure, then I will think about disaster recovery and the end. But actually, your preparation to your disaster recovery starts from the beginning, during the identifies phase, which means it starts from the risk assessment. And especially, it's not because it's OT, and OT is mainly connected to the physics, to the physical installation. it should start from the cyber physical risk assessment. So this is a diagram that I have put here. It's very complicated, but this is as you need to execute cyber physical risk assessment in order so all of this will fit into your preparedness plan. So when you start your cyber physical risk assessment, it's usually, it all starts, you have a user and you have an attacker. It can be insider users and it can be malicious, it can be non-malicious, it becomes an attacker. Then they have intent, capability, opportunity. So usually all of these three must be met in order to execute successful attack. If one of these are missing, usually the attack is not successful. And these actors can select either they're going to attack assets such as HMI device or channel. Either it can be Modbus, right? And then they have some TTP, and they have a weakness with an exposure. And this weakness will be usually exploited. For this weakness, you're putting the controls. Then you have your cyber physical risk, and then it all comes down to the emergency preparedness. So in the cyber physical risk, where if you remember in the beginning of the slide, I talked about maximum tolerable downtime, and this maximum tolerable downtime drives the recovery strategy. So this maximum tolerable downtime should be identified during the cyber physical risk. So during the cyber physical risk, usually you do your criticality assessment where you have identified your functions. From the functions, you have identified your dependencies. After that, you have identified your maximum tolerable downtime. And after that, it starts driving your recovery time objective. Then it starts recovery point objective. Once you have done this, then you move on to the protect phase according to the NIST. Then in protect phase, you start doing your controls. Okay, I have detection controls, I have antivirus, then, okay, my backup and strategy, my incident response, all of this, the preparation is going on, taking into account disaster recovery plan. And then when you reach to the end, it will just feed in here and you have already ready procedure that is basically doesn't require so much effort. But if you start at the end, you might again should visit your identify phase and then again go over all of your activities that you have done before. So this concludes my talk. I tried to go over super quick. So I always I like this Vinci Lombardi quote, which means it's not whether you get knocked down, it's whether you get up. So which means we are never 100% secure. It's not like we will not be attacked. It's like, okay, if we get attacked, how can we get up? And I mean, the good thing, I'm lucky enough to work with a lot of companies around the globe, including Middle East, US, APAC region, Europe, and a lot of mature companies is preparing to be resilient. And it's not only they're preparing to be resilient from the technical side, from my talk, also lawyers are working on their terminologies that in case of the attack, they will not be sued much, they will not, that they have done their due diligence, they have did their best practice. So which means that we have to be resilient. And the recent CrowdStrike attack, I say this CrowdStrike is just like a ransomware attack, even though it is not a cyber attack, but it was a security event, which of course they have issued how you can recover, but in that case, you need to have a plan how you can recover from that. And in addition to that, also, I'm an executive advisor for the Singaporean government as well. They have released, and I've been one of the authors of their OT Cybersecurity Master Plan, where they have introduced that right now companies must be resilient, which is again comes down to your recovery and incident response strategy. I think this concludes my talk, and
Great.
yeah, let me share. And I forgot to mention, if you're recording, I want to thank to the woman in cybersecurity Middle East. Because I'm member of Women in Cybersecurity Middle East, specifically Dr. Rim, who has basically connected us with Dr. Suleiman. And I'm also founder of Women in Cybersecurity Kazakhstan as well.
Right. So talking about women, what do you think? Can you open the?
Yeah.
Thanks. Thank you. Because you're involved in women's cybersecurity, what do you think of the role of women in OT cybersecurity in particular? Have you seen? Are they many? Are they increasing? Do they like it? What do you think?
So if we look to the statistics first, to the numbers, it's a 10%. It's a 10%.
10%.
In OT cybersecurity. In OT cybersecurity. But if I see from the, I'm a person who has been grown up with a diverse nation and with diverse people, which means I believe for any company to be innovative, they need to employ people with a diverse background, which means female and male as well, because we bring different, I would say, innovative ideas and I would say solution how to solve the problems. And if we speak about the right now, the roles, right, last 3-4 years, we're having more women in this industry. I think this is due to the fact that even specifically OT cyber is becoming more, so we have more opportunities right now to work remote, that we can work remote and control systems. Also, we can sit in the office and work remotely. Before it was just air gapped, which means you have to be on site in order to do some type of activities in OT. Because it's becoming more connected and we have, as I said, sitting at home work or from the office, and OT cyber now offering more different domains such as threat intelligence part, such as risk assessment part, also detection, also the architecture review. All of these different domains is bringing more women to our field. But I still think the communities such as Women in Cybersecurity Middle East, this kind of communities plays essential role to connect each other and help us to grow and motivate each other. We are women like this. We want to see other women and get motivated. Maybe this is the difference, to see as a role model. Oh, she has a kids and she, like Dr. Reem, she has 7 kids and she did it. I can do it as well.
Yeah, that's why I talked to her and asked her if she knows women in OT cybersecurity who would she recommend. And she recommended you, of course, and I'm really glad that I have a woman in my podcast. And yeah, well, I mean, by interviewing you, I mean, this, and if any woman is watching this, we encourage them I mean, join this field and participate. And do you think it's difficult for women to enter this field, or?
No, actually, right now, a lot of companies in Middle East also, they're encouraging more women to join. Even the Dale Peterson S4, they're giving away 10 scholarship as well to attend S4 to bring more women. The only thing I think in this field, it's not woman or man, it's a little bit hard field to enter to anyone. I mean, if I take from the field perspective, because apart from cybersecurity, you need to know functional safety, you need to know electrical engineering, you need to know mechanical engineering a little bit. Because if, for example, you're the business unit owner, you're not going to let it touch your system to the person who is not experienced enough and make your plant shut down, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So this, I think from that perspective, it's not for women or it's in the general OT cyber, it's a little bit hard field compared with IT cyber, where you don't have this physics on it. It's just, IT, cyber. good to go. But in OT, like I need to know pressure. What is pressure? What is the sensors are responsible for? What is means XV valve is like, because if you don't know these details, it makes hard your job to do. So this is just in a nutshell, meaning that it's a little bit hard work, hard field to enter in.
You're involved in the training, right? What do you think of the current training in OT cybersecurity? Do you think it's available? Is it the quality is good? Do you think it needs improvement?
So before when I joined, at that time I couldn't find much trainings, but right now, as I said, because of it's all about cyber attack, yeah, trends. We had a lot of cyber attacks in our industry. That's why we got a lot of attention to this field. So training quality is improving. I like SANS training. They have 410, 612. They're trying to improve and add more classes. The second training, every almost vendor, for example, I work in Honeywell, we do provide trainings as well, vendor neutral, and also other companies provide trainings, but this is paid trainings. But there are also free, I think CISA offers a couple of free virtual trainings, and then like me, S4, Sans ICS, they put in the YouTube, like you are doing great job with the podcast. It's like a training as well. So people should follow your podcast. BRISAC, S4, Sans ICS community publish a lot of free resources. And we do, like I'm involved in community. So we do a lot of to this community to help people to grow. So a lot of it's available, and they can, I mean, anyone who's watching can reach out to me in LinkedIn, Saltanat Mashirova, and I can, I mean, drop it books that I like to read in our industry, the trainings that I think is good, all of this. This is my 24/7
Oh, thank you.
passion.
Really appreciate your work. No, I mean, I haven't asked you about your framework. I mean, is your framework has been adopted by anybody in the West or the Middle East, or what do they think about your framework so far?
Middle East, I got very, so because I'm employer of Honeywell, because of this framework I developed with my, I mean, while working, I have presented also during Honeywell users group. A lot of our customers in Honeywell, they're adapting my framework. They came to me and said, thank you. They were trying to how they start. And then they actually, and then they just recently contacted me in the Middle East. It's a big oil and gas company. They messaged me that they're adapting this framework, how to do it. Again, I haven't patented. I thought it's something interesting. I know this is just a 5% of the iceberg of the disaster recovery, but at least it gives a kind of body structure.
Yeah, the layout.
Yeah, skeleton, or you just name it. Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks for joining us, Saltanat. Really appreciate you giving us this really useful and beneficial topic. It's a bit advanced, but hopefully I have some viewers. I'm sure they are also have experience, so I'm sure they will understand. Anything you would like to say before we conclude?
Oh, I would say that thank you very much. What you're doing is amazing for the community, because of such a people like you, we grow and we learn. And because our industry, it's not just we're protecting cookie shop, right? It's about critical infrastructure, which means we're trying, as I say to my kids, like they're right now sitting, that they think mommy is helping to live this world better place to live. Yes.
Nice. Yeah, I mean, that's why we're here for, to benefit the community and share knowledge, and by interviewing professionals like yourself. And it's really an honor to have you. Thank you very much, Saltanat.
Thank you.
Have a good time and good night.
Thank you so much. And share with me, and I will share in my LinkedIn account.
I will.
And I will try to spread more with to the people that there is amazing podcast.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I will. Thanks. Thank you. Okay. Thanks everybody for watching this episode. Our guest Saltanat. We really had a good time. Thank you very much. Take care. Bye.